place was disgusting. Everywhere around me, even inside the still shut homes, I could see the effect tearing apart what was left inside of them. Even though most things weren't made of whatever old fabric it was, pieces of it were strewn across everything, bagging downwards from gravity and swaying in the wind as if they were cobwebs. Nothing donned their usual color, only being covered by a sickly beige hue that constantly strained my eyes as they kept trying to derive color from anything, obviously failing right after. The air felt hot and unusually dry, and I could feel my mouth smacking as if it was two pieces of sandpaper rubbing together. My body had that awful sticky feeling from prematurely waking up, making every rub of my clothing against my skin agonizing, and only made the already parching heat even less bearable. The lights that lined my street were turned on, as well as the houses that lined those streets, although many of them had since deteriorated and their casing had broken, leaving the internal electrical wiring exposed. It baffled me how these were somehow managing power, as nobody could supply a source, as there was nobody. There seemed to be literally no trace of recent human activity anywhere. Cars were impossible to find, with garages and the street curbs being completely vacant of anything. What kicked me into moving from where I was the bead of sweat that trickled down my head. Gross, but not surprising. I didn't really have a goal as I explored the deserted neighborhoods around me, really only interested in stumbling upon a much cooler area, or hopefully some water if it hadn't already been contaminated by whatever this beige crap was. Although the sun seemed to have risen to the point of it being either late in the morning or sometime right after noon, shadows from objects were nowhere to be seen outside, somehow penetrating through objects and foliage to burn down onto the ground. At first, my choice would have been to breach a house and try to scavenge for any clean water that may have been inside it, as well as seek some shelter from the sun. But I was second guessing the idea once I realized I wasn't sure about the stability of the houses, as they seemed to just be barely withstanding the deterioration of themselves. As the neighborhoods passed, more commercial buildings sprung into view, mostly fast-serving stores like fast food or convenience. That was my target. If I was feeling optimistic, I would have hoped for at least half of really anything inside to be salvageable, but I gave myself a more realistic outcome and guessed I was going to be looking for scraps. Before I entered, I bounced back to that thought. Since most of the lights that I had seen prior were activated, I wondered if the same applied to these stores and the appliances inside them. Only one way to find out. As I entered the convenience store, I was greeted by the store's jet air that was supposed to wash away bugs, which immediately made me breathe a sigh of relief as I paused and just sat under it, relishing the cool air as it brushed onto my face. Even though normally cold air tensed me and vice versa for hot air, the pure relief at escaping the heat relaxed my muscles to when I came into contact with it. Finally, I muttered underneath my breath. It was so soothing, it actually took my focus off needing something to drink. When the door snapped shut for being open for too long, it snapped me back to where I was. Right, drinks. Let's see if anything's actually good in here. I brought myself to the back of the store, where the freezers that harbored most of the drinks sat. To my delight, they all shone with a white glare, everything in full display to be picked out. It was mostly what you'd expect: water, smoothies, energy drinks, and then liquor drinks. Even though the color was seemingly revolting, as my first impression was that it would taste like vomit, it wasn't like I had any other choice in the matter. The dryness wasn't barricaded from entering, and even though the little moment that I had relieved some of the discomfort, it was constant and creeping up upon me again like a wave. I felt no point in splurging, as the situation that I was put in wouldn't really allow it, but I also didn't see a reason why not to make the best out of a bad situation. So grabbing mostly water, but a couple of my favorite smoothies to treat myself, I exited the place, bathing in the flowing air once more before being surrounded by the scorching heat again. Immediately upon exiting the store, the heat charged at me with full force, showcasing the difference in temperature from my drinks and it by a significant margin. The water from the drink seeped through the microscopic cracks in their containers, soaking my clothes with both just water and the mix of fruit from the smoothies, which would make a disgusting sticky film after it dried. To make matters even worse, the air was so scorching that it was starting to quite literally evaporate from the bottles, forcing me to drink one in order to salvage what it had left. My throat seemingly rejected it, as it was both burning and went into my windpipe, making me upchuck what I had just drank. My eyes started watering, and it took all of my effort not to let the drinks I had in my arms slip and explode onto the pavement, not letting me, well, drink it anymore. I could feel my eyes itch as they clouded, my knees buckled before I had to slowly inch the ground and place the drinks firmly on it so I could focus my attention only on relieving myself from this pure discomfort. As my vision returned, I tried to breathe and figure out what had happened. My throat was still horrendously in pain, but I could still inhale and exhale, which relieved the stress that I had. I got up, my knees still shaking, and I snatched the group of drinks that I had. Moving forward, still no clue where I was planning to go, but seemingly going off of just instinct. I didn't really know what to make of what I was seeing. My bed was the only thing unaffected by whatever it was, although it had been altered by color, as instead of white, it now had gained a lifeless tan that was extremely depressing to look at, and also oddly dry. The paint on the walls of my room was peeling severely, exposing the internals of my house as well as making it much less comfortable to stay in. Above me, the ceiling light that had somehow flickered on sometime at night had its exterior shattered, leaving an open hole in the side of the light bulb that made the light that was shining towards me blinding. I slammed my fist against the switch in order to turn it off, but in doing so, not only did the light refuse to turn off, the house started creaking and rocking, sending agile specks of dust in the air, covering me with it. Annoyed, I shoved off my clothes, only for the dust to fester on the ground, the now unstable house just throwing more to replace it. Around my house were these hammock-looking droops of a similar color to my room, seemingly formed by the tears in the walls and the ceiling. I was wary of coming into contact with them, as they seemingly were spontaneous and didn't originate from anything naturally. I could feel the floor below me slightly give, as my right foot fell slightly lower than where it should have been. Shit, I mumbled. Seemingly responding to my frustration, the house bellowed with a monstrous roar, sending objects in every direction and shifting the stature of the house to be askew. The furniture that lined the walls and corners of the room were thrown to the opposite side with a hollowing bang, and glassware was shattered upon impact when thrown to the ground. Pieces of everything were everywhere, somehow making more of a mess than what originally was there, except now it was a hazard of shards and various broken materials. By some miracle, the house hadn't yet collapsed, somehow managing to uphold itself on what little it had to go on, especially now that it had been attacked by different objects. Although I was thankful for that, my instincts from that event told me that the house probably didn't care if someone was in it if it collapsed, making me dash to the front door of my house, where I exited through. More objects flew across my house when I reached the outside, forcing an even louder groan from the house that pained me to hear, as it collapsing would have been pretty disheartening as well. It was where my family had lived. Thinking that kicked me into trying to figure out the situation. I hadn't seen anyone in my house, which I originally thought was because they had left for somewhere. But looking around, all I could see were the houses on my street, unoccupied by anything or anyone. Cars were arranged perfectly in everybody's driveway. None were inside their garages or lining the curb of the streets. Human activity was apparently recent, as I could see a tennis ball resting on a grass patch next to a more luxurious house, an open garage that had a workbench occupying it, as well as a dog leash that was now stretched along the ground. That same drooping material was extremely overpopulated, as houses had them straining from rooftop to rooftop, and some of them taller and longer than I was, which was slightly intimidating to see. What had happened? This thing was everywhere. Items that people owned seemed to have been dropped at a specific moment, leaving them behind on the ground as if something had happened to them. It was oddly hot. So many bizarre and random conditions that had been mixed into this situation, yet I couldn't seem to dig for an explanation for it. It was too confusing to even start pondering why this was the case, nonetheless dangerous due to the aging of everything. As the sun threw its rays at me with more intensity, I was forced to leave my neighborhood as I heard houses that were planted farther down the street starting to give out, making a deafening thud as they transformed into pure rubble. It was frightening to witness, as the wreckage was being thrown tremendously far from its initial location, most of it barreling my way with speed. I knew they wouldn't manage a path to trajectory perfectly towards me, but that didn't mean that their effect was non-existent. I could feel my balance being shifted by the gusts of air they threw my way when barreling past me, some objects made of metal skidding across the pavement with sparks that shot in every direction, and others shoveling the ground upwards, tearing apart the already destroyed road. At that point, my body was screaming at me for only one goal: getting the hell out.